Your husband called you uneducated, you quietly walked away, but what he discovered afterward.
Hello everyone. Enjoy these relaxing moments while you watch.
Lucy sat on the old armchair in the living room, pale sunlight streaming through the frosted window. The sound of traffic outside echoed faintly, but inside the small house, everything was eerily quiet. She stared intently at her hands that were so accustomed to unacknowledged, thankless tasks. "Lucy, are you going to clear the table or sit there all day?" Thomas, her husband, called from the kitchen. His tone was not warm, it was cold and commanding. She stood up and quickly folded the old tablecloth. "I'm doing it," she replied softly, trying to hide her sigh. Thomas walked into the living room with a coffee cup in hand. His neatly pressed clothes were always immaculate, a sharp contrast to Lucy's simple appearance. "I don't understand why you're always so slow. If you can't even handle these little chores, what can you do?" Lucy lowered her head slightly, not wanting to argue. Inside, she felt a heavy weight pressing down on her, but she knew that reacting would only make things worse. Thomas continued, oblivious to his wife's expression. "Yesterday, I saw Kara at the office. She just finished her master's degree. Such an admirable woman. Not like some people." He left the sentence unfinished, but his disdainful glance at Lucy made the message clear. Shortly after, the doorbell rang. Lucy rushed to answer it and found Pilar, her best friend from high school, standing there. "Lucy. It's been so long. Why do you look so tired?" Pilar asked with concern. Lucy forced a smile and invited her friend in. "I've just been a little busy. Would you like some tea?" As the two sat down to talk, Thomas walked into the living room. He gave Pilar a dismissive glance before turning to Lucy. "Don't you have work to do? Or are you both planning to sit here chatting all day?" Pilar was surprised by Thomas's attitude. "I think Lucy deserves a little rest," she said, trying to stay calm. Thomas smirked. "Rest? She's home all day, why would she need rest?" Lucy quickly intervened before things could escalate. "Pilar, I'm sorry. Let's talk another time, okay?" Pilar looked at Lucy with sympathetic eyes but didn't want to cause more trouble. "All right, I'll call you later," she said before leaving. After Pilar left, Thomas turned to Lucy. "Next time, don't bring friends over without letting me know. This house isn't a place for gatherings." Lucy nodded silently, feeling like all hope of understanding had vanished. That evening, as Thomas watched TV, Lucy quietly prepared dinner. She made the soup he liked, hoping it might at least please him. But when she served it, Thomas frowned. "Again with this soup? Can't you try making something different? I'm sick of it." Lucy stared at the bowl of soup, her disappointment overwhelming. She had spent the entire afternoon preparing it, only to be met with complaints. "Do you think I come home after working all day at the office just to eat boring meals like this?" Thomas continued his criticism, oblivious to Lucy's downcast expression. When dinner ended, Lucy cleared the table in silence, the question echoing in her mind, "What did I do wrong?" Later, as they went to bed, Lucy heard Thomas mumbling in his sleep, "Lucy lacks both education and ability, nothing like the other women." She lay still, tears streaming down her face, but she dared not make a sound. Before her was darkness, and in her heart, a suffocating feeling of being trapped with no way out. The next day, Lucy tried to hide her sadness as she stood in front of the bedroom mirror, adjusting the simple dress she would wear to the family gathering that day. The light from the window revealed the dark circles under her eyes. She sighed softly, reminding herself to stay calm, knowing what awaited her. "Lucy, what's taking so long?" Thomas's voice called from downstairs, tinged with irritation. "We can't wait for you all day." "I'm coming," she replied, hurrying out of the room. When she reached the living room, Thomas was already there in his elegant suit, his expression filled with impatience. "That dress again? Don't you have anything else? You look so plain. Lucy pressed her lips together, hiding her hurt. She didn't want to argue before the gathering even began. On the way to Amelia's house, Thomas's mother, the atmosphere in the car was heavy. Thomas chatted enthusiastically with his brother Diego on the phone, boasting about his career achievements. Lucy sat silently in the passenger seat, gripping her handbag tightly, not daring to interrupt. When they arrived, the party was already in full swing. Relatives gathered in the large garden, laughter and chatter filling the air. Amelia greeted them, embracing Thomas warmly. "My son, always so busy, but you still made time to come. Such a pride." Lucy managed a faint smile as Amelia merely nodded at her. She was used to being an outsider in this family. At the party, Thomas quickly became the center of attention, sharing stories of the major projects he was leading and how he had overcome difficult challenges. Applause and admiration surrounded him, feeding his ego. "And what about Lucy, a relative?" Christina asked, turning to her with curiosity. Lucy barely opened her mouth to reply when Thomas cut her off. "Her. With her lack of education, she stays home, takes care of the kids, and does little chores. Luckily, I can support the family." The table erupted in laughter as if Thomas had just told a funny joke. Lucy felt her face flush, but she didn't know what to say. Christina tried to salvage the moment. "But I've heard Lucy is very creative. Last time, I saw some of the crafts you made, and they were beautiful." "Oh, right, those little trinkets," Thomas said dismissively. "But that's just a hobby. It's not real work." Lucy lowered her head, feeling humiliated under everyone's gaze. But the embarrassment didn't end there. "Speaking of which, a cousin, Javier, laughed loudly. Didn't Lucy try some little project a few months ago? I heard it was a big mess and lost money, right? Someone told me about it." Javier's words cut into Lucy's pride like a knife. She tried to force a smile, but he went on, "I don't understand why you thought you could do something like that. So reckless." Thomas didn't defend his wife. In fact, he laughed along. "True enough. Lucy does have some unrealistic dreams sometimes." Lucy couldn't take it anymore. She stood up, struggling to keep her voice steady. "Excuse me, I need to go inside for a moment." She walked quickly into the house, locking herself in the bathroom. Tears streamed down her face as she buried her head in her hands, trying to stifle her sobs. She felt like nothing more than a shadow, worthless, invisible, and utterly unappreciated. A while later, Pilar unexpectedly appeared, knocking softly on the bathroom door. "Lucy, it's me. Are you okay?" Lucy quickly wiped her tears and opened the door. "I'm fine," she said, but her red, swollen eyes told a different story. Pilar stepped inside and placed a hand on her friend's shoulder. "I can't just sit by and watch you be treated like that. Thomas had no right to act that way in front of everyone." "Don't say anything more, Pilar. You'll only make things worse," Lucy whispered. "But you don't deserve this," Pilar said firmly. "Lucy, you have to do something. Don't let him keep looking down on you like this." Lucy didn't respond, her gaze fixed on the floor. Inside her, pain and helplessness swirled into an indescribable storm of emotions. Lucy sat in the small kitchen, the dim light from the ceiling lamp casting a tired glow on her face. After the family gathering, the humiliation still clung to her. She tried to focus on washing dishes, but her trembling hands caused a plate to slip and fall into the sink with a loud clang. "Lucy, what are you doing?" Thomas entered the kitchen, frowning. "I told you to be careful. Do you even know how expensive that plate is?" "I'm sorry," she said softly, lowering her head to avoid his angry glare. "Sorry? That's all you ever say. You can't do anything right," Thomas snapped, his voice dripping with contempt. Lucy bit her lip hard to hold back her tears. She wanted to stand up for herself, but every previous attempt had only led to endless arguments, and in the end, she always bore the brunt of it. That night, Lucy lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Next to her, Thomas was already fast asleep, his steady breathing a stark contrast to her heavy sighs. In the darkness, old memories surfaced, promises he had once made to her when they were newlyweds still rang clearly in her mind. "Lucy, you're the most wonderful woman I've ever met," Thomas had said during a romantic candlelit evening. "I'll always support you, always respect your dreams. Together, we'll build a happy life." She had believed those words, had given her heart to the man she thought would be her rock. But now, all that remained were bitter memories. The next morning, Lucy woke up early, as she did every day, to prepare breakfast for Thomas and their two children, Sophia and Matthew. The two kids sat at the table, their eyes watching their mother closely, sensing something wasn't right. "Mom, why were you sad yesterday?" Sophia asked softly, her voice full of concern. Lucy paused and looked at her daughter. "It's nothing, sweetheart. Mommy was just a little tired." Matthew, her younger son, chimed in. "Mom, I heard Dad say you're not good at things, but I think you're amazing. You do everything for us." Matthew's innocent words cut through Lucy's heart like a knife. She tried to smile, but tears rolled down her cheeks. "Thank you, Matthew. You and Sophia are Mommy's greatest pride." Thomas entered the kitchen, raising an eyebrow at the scene before him. "Lucy, what are you crying about? The kids don't need to see this." Lucy quickly wiped her tears and lowered her head. "It's nothing, I just..." "Just what? Complaining again?" Thomas interrupted. "I don't have time for this nonsense. I have work to do, and I keep wondering if you'll ever find something more useful to do." His words were another blow to Lucy, but she said nothing, silently continuing her tasks. That afternoon, Pilar called Lucy. "Lucy, do you have time today? I want to meet you at the cafe near your house," Pilar said, her voice filled with concern. Lucy hesitated for a moment but eventually agreed. She needed someone to confide in, even just a little. When she arrived at the cafe, Pilar was already waiting. She stood up to hug Lucy and then pulled her into a seat. "Lucy, I can't stop thinking about what happened at the party yesterday." "You can't keep living like this," Pilar said, her eyes full of empathy. Lucy lowered her head, remaining silent. "Pilar, I don't know what to do," Lucy said, her voice trembling. "I have no education, no qualifications, nothing. If I leave, how will my children survive? I can't let them suffer." "But you can't let them grow up in an environment like this," Pilar countered. "They need a strong mother, not one who just endures." Pilar's words left Lucy silent. A storm of conflicting emotions brewed inside her: fear of facing life alone and the desire to be respected, to live a meaningful life. When Lucy returned home, she saw Sophia and Matthew playing in the yard. She stood at a distance, watching the two children laugh and play. A faint sense of resolve began to stir within her. In her mind, Pilar's words echoed, "They need a strong mother." The next morning, Lucy woke up very early. The world was still shrouded in mist, and the faint light of dawn seeped through the small window, creating a hazy glow. She walked into the kitchen and quietly began preparing breakfast. When Thomas came downstairs, as usual, he glanced at the table and frowned. "Is this all? Can't you come up with something more creative?" Lucy tried to remain calm. "I thought these were the dishes you liked. If you want something else, you can let me know. I'm not the one managing the kitchen." "That's your job," Thomas snapped, pulling out a chair to sit down. Sophia and Matthew ate their breakfast in silence, their eyes darting nervously between their parents. The tension in the room was palpable. Later that morning, Lucy took the children to school. On her way back, she stopped by a small grocery store where she knew Carmen, the kind-hearted woman who ran the shop. Lucy, you've lost weight, Carmen remarked as Lucy browsed the shelves. Lucy forced a smile. I've just been busy. Busy or tired? Carmen asked, her gaze soft yet probing. Lucy didn't answer. She looked down, selecting a few items, feeling as though Carmen's question had stirred a wave inside her. As she paid, Carmen leaned in slightly. Lucy, if you ever need to talk, I'm always here. Don't keep everything bottled up, it's not good for you. Lucy nodded slightly. Thank you, Carmen. That afternoon, when Thomas returned home, he carried a bag from an upscale store. He placed it on the table and opened it, pulling out a brand new suit. What do you think? Nice, right? Thomas asked, though he wasn't actually waiting for an answer. I need this for next week's meeting. It's important, and I need to make a strong impression. Lucy looked at the suit, a sense of detachment rising within her. She knew Thomas was only talking to himself, as he often did. It's very nice, she replied softly. Of course, it is. I always have to be the best, Thomas said smugly. You should try to learn from me. Anyway, you could do a better job keeping the house tidy. Lucy clenched her fists, forcing herself not to react. That evening, as the family sat down for dinner, Matthew hesitantly asked, Dad, isn't Mom good at things too? Thomas paused, looking at his son as if the question was the most ridiculous thing he'd ever heard. Good? What is she good at? She just stays home. Sophia objected, but Mom does everything for us. She cooks, does the laundry, cleans, and takes care of us. Those are her responsibilities as your mother, Thomas said without hesitation. I'm the one who works to support this family. Lucy wanted to stop the conversation, but she couldn't bring herself to speak. Thomas's words felt like knives, cutting not only into her but also extinguishing the confidence her children were trying to give her. After dinner, Lucy cleaned up in the kitchen. Thomas sat on the sofa, watching TV with the volume turned up. Inside her, a storm of emotions brewed, anger mixed with helplessness. A while later, her phone rang. It was Pilar. Lucy, I've been thinking about what happened yesterday, and I can't stay silent. You need to change your life. If you don't, you'll drown in misery forever, Pilar said firmly. Pilar, I know. But what can I do? I can't leave my kids. I have nothing to start over with, Lucy replied, her voice trembling. You don't have to leave your kids. You can live for yourself and still be a good mother. Think about what you deserve, Lucy. You don't deserve to suffer like this, Pilar urged. Lucy was silent. Pilar's words echoed in her mind, but she still lacked the courage to act. When she went to bed, Lucy couldn't sleep. She lay still in the darkness, listening to Thomas's steady breathing beside her. She wondered, how long will I live like this? When will I have the courage to change? A small determination began to flicker inside her, but fear and insecurity stood like a thick wall, holding her back from stepping out of the cycle of resignation. Lucy woke up early the next morning, before the sunlight filtered through the window. She felt exhausted not from lack of sleep, but from the weight in her heart. As always, she began her day quietly. When Thomas came down to the kitchen, he looked around as if searching for something. Lucy, where's my tie? I told you to prepare it last night. Lucy paused and met his gaze. I left it on the sofa, right next to your bag. Thomas frowned. That's not the proper place for it. You always mess everything up. Do you even know how much I have to deal with out there? All you have to do are small tasks in the house, and you can't even get those right. Lucy didn't respond and quietly continued making breakfast. But inside, the familiar weariness rose again. Around noon, Lucy went to the school to pick up Sophia and Matthew. Both children were cheerful, laughing as they ran toward their mother. Mom, I got a high score in math today. Sophia exclaimed, holding her workbook up high. Lucy smiled and hugged her daughter. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you." Matthew chimed in, "I did a really good drawing too. My teacher said I could become an artist." Lucy ruffled her son's hair, sharing in their joy. But that joy quickly faded when she thought about facing Thomas back at home. That evening, during dinner, Sophia excitedly shared her achievement. "Dad, I got a high score in math today." Thomas glanced at his daughter and merely shrugged. "Good. But next time, aim for a perfect score. Just getting a high score isn't enough." Sophia's face fell, her smile fading. Lucy couldn't stay silent anymore. "Thomas, I think she did great. You should praise her more instead of criticizing." Thomas stopped and gave Lucy a cold look. "Are you teaching me how to be a father? If you're so good, why don't you do everything yourself?" "Oh, wait, you haven't done anything significant, have you?" The atmosphere in the room froze. Matthew looked at his mother with worried eyes. Lucy didn't respond, quietly finishing her meal. Inside, Thomas's words felt like deep cuts to her pride. That night, after the children were asleep, Lucy sat in the armchair in the living room. She stared at the family photo on the table. In the picture, Thomas had a radiant smile, while her smile was faint, masking her sadness. She thought about the early years of their marriage when everything was sweet and full of hope. Thomas had once been a loving and supportive man. But over time, his arrogance and ambition had turned him into someone cold and dismissive of her. As she lost herself in thought, her phone rang. It was Pilar. "Pilar, what is it?" Lucy asked weakly. "Lucy, I want you to listen to me this time," Pilar said with determination. "You can't go on like this. I asked around, and there's a vocational training center looking for new students. You could learn something new, start over." Lucy froze. The idea both scared and filled her with a glimmer of hope. "I don't know, Pilar. I'm not sure I can do it." "You can," Pilar insisted. "You're a strong woman, Lucy. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. If not for yourself, then do it for your kids." Pilar's words lit a small fire inside Lucy. But fear quickly followed. She was terrified of change, of standing alone without support. The next day, Thomas made an unexpected announcement. "This weekend, I have a gathering with colleagues. Make sure to prepare the food, and it better be good. I don't want to be embarrassed because of you." Lucy looked at him, her heart burning with anger, but she kept her composure. "I'll do it, but I don't want to be treated like a servant anymore. I'm your wife, not your maid." Thomas raised an eyebrow and let out a mocking laugh. "Who do you think you are? You should know your place, Lucy. Stop dreaming." His words felt like a bucket of cold water poured over her, but this time, Lucy didn't only feel hurt. A growing sense of anger began to swell within her. She turned her back to him, not wanting him to see her tear-filled eyes. Deep down, she told herself she had to do something to change her life. On the weekend, Lucy woke up earlier than usual. The morning light seeped through the thin curtains, but she felt an overwhelming emptiness inside. She went downstairs to the kitchen and began preparing food for the gathering Thomas had demanded. On the kitchen counter, the ingredients were laid out, but Lucy stared at them blankly. Thomas's sneering words from the previous day echoed in her mind, "You should know your place." When Thomas entered the kitchen, he glanced over at what Lucy had prepared. "Make sure the beef stew is done properly this time. Last time, it was undercooked, and people laughed at me." Lucy pressed her lips together and said nothing. She knew that no matter how well she did, it would never be enough for Thomas. The gathering took place in the backyard. Thomas's colleagues arrived one by one, all impeccably dressed and wearing polite smiles. Lucy quietly greeted them while Thomas stood in the center of the group, bragging about his achievements. "Lucy, bring out more wine," Thomas called loudly from a distance, unconcerned that she was busy clearing the table. Lucy put down the dish she was carrying and hurried inside to fetch the wine. When she returned, she heard laughter coming from Thomas's colleagues. "A man like you, married to a woman like her? That's surprising," said a blonde woman named Valeria, her tone dripping with mockery. "Exactly," another chimed in. "Lucy seems so plain." Thomas didn't defend her. Instead, he shrugged and gave a dismissive chuckle. "She stays home, takes care of the house and kids. Simple, but it works." The words were like a dagger to Lucy's heart. She stood frozen in the yard, feeling exposed and humiliated under the scrutinizing eyes of everyone around her. When the guests had left, Lucy began cleaning up. The sun had set, but her work was far from done. Thomas sat on the sofa, scrolling through his phone, with no intention of helping. "Are you done yet? Make sure to wash the wine glasses thoroughly. I don't want to see stains next time," he said without even looking up. Lucy stopped what she was doing and turned to look at him. "Thomas, don't you think I'm tired too? I've done everything to make this gathering perfect for you, yet you didn't even say thank you." Thomas smirked and put down his phone. "Thank you. That's your duty. Do you think you're so special that you deserve gratitude?" Lucy felt her chest tighten. "I don't need your gratitude," she said, her voice trembling. "I just need respect. But you've never seen me as a partner, only as someone doing work you consider beneath you." Thomas raised an eyebrow, as if her words were the most absurd thing he'd ever heard. "If you feel like you can't handle it, then leave. But remember, Lucy, no one needs you. You're just an ordinary woman." That night, Lucy sat at the dining table, the light from the overhead lamp casting a faint glow on her face. Inside, she wrestled with a storm of pain and resolve. She grabbed a blank piece of paper, picked up a pen, and began to write. "Thomas. I've spent my entire life trying to do everything for this family. I've sacrificed, endured, and hoped that my love and care would be met with respect. But you've never seen me as a wife, as a partner. To you, I'm just someone who works for free. Today, I've decided to leave. Not because I hate you, but because I can't continue living a life without value. I need to find myself again, and our children need a strong mother, not a silent shadow. Good luck with your life. Don't worry, I won't take anything from you except the self-respect I've lost for so long." The next morning, Lucy woke up before sunrise. She quietly packed her belongings, taking only what was necessary. When everything was ready, she walked into Sophia and Matthew's room. The two children were sound asleep, their breathing steady. Lucy bent down and kissed their foreheads gently. "I love you both. I'll come back for you soon, I promise," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Finally, she placed the letter on the coffee table in the living room, where Thomas was sure to see it when he woke up. Lucy stepped out of the house, feeling both pain and relief. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was ready to face it. She needed to do this not just for herself, but for her children. As the door closed behind her, Lucy walked into the morning light, starting a new chapter of her life. It was a chapter without Thomas but filled with hope. After Lucy left, Thomas woke up the next morning with a strange feeling. Sunlight streamed into the living room, illuminating the letter on the table. He frowned as he saw it and picked it up to read. Each line felt like a blow to his pride. He clenched the paper tightly in his hands, staring blankly into space. The absence of Lucy made the house feel empty and unnervingly cold. In the days that followed, Thomas tried to carry on as usual. He prepared his own breakfast, cleaned the house, but it wasn't as simple as he'd imagined. Chaos quickly ensued. One morning, while rushing to finish a report for a meeting, Thomas received a call from Carmen, his manager. "Thomas, the document you submitted yesterday is full of errors. We can't use it. You need to fix it and send it back immediately," Carmen said, her disappointment evident. Thomas frowned, staring at his computer screen. "I'll fix it right away," he replied, but his stomach churned with anxiety. As he hung up, he realized something: Lucy had always helped him review these documents. He'd taken it for granted, never showing appreciation or gratitude. That evening, Thomas tried to cook dinner for the kids. Sophia and Matthew sat at the table, watching their father fumble in the kitchen. "Dad, Mom used to make the best meatballs," Sophia said, her eyes sad. "I miss Mom," Matthew added quietly. Thomas stopped what he was doing, guilt washing over him. He tried to keep his voice steady. "I know," he said. "I miss her too. That dinner was a failure." Thomas burned the meatballs, and the children ended up eating cereal instead of a proper meal. As he tucked the children into bed, Sophia held his hand and asked, "Dad, is Mom coming back?" Thomas didn't know how to answer. "I'm not sure, sweetheart. But I'll try my best." In the weeks that followed, Thomas began to truly feel Lucy's absence. His business struggles grew more apparent without her support. Tasks he had once dismissed as simple now became heavy burdens. One day, Carmen called Thomas into the meeting room. "Thomas, I need to have a serious conversation with you," Carmen said sternly. "Your performance over the past few weeks has been declining significantly. If you don't improve, we may have to reconsider your position here." Thomas felt like he had been doused with cold water. He lowered his head, trying to find an explanation. "I'm sorry, Carmen. I'll do better." Leaving the meeting room, Thomas felt lost. He walked slowly down the company hallway, his mind consumed by swirling thoughts. That weekend, Thomas took Sophia and Matthew to the park. As the children played, he sat on a bench, watching them. For the first time, he truly realized what he had lost. An older man sat down beside him. "You look tired, young man," the man said with a friendly smile. "My name's Enrique. Would you like to talk?" Thomas hesitated, but Enrique's sincere gaze encouraged him to open up. "I think I've made a big mistake in my life," he said. Enrique nodded without interrupting. "I took my wife for granted. I thought I was the most important person in the family, but now I see she did everything. She's left, and I don't know how to fix it," Thomas admitted. Enrique looked at him with understanding. "Recognizing your mistakes is the first step, young man. But the more important thing is to act to correct them. If you truly want her to come back, you need to prove that you've changed not with words, but with actions." Enrique's advice stayed with Thomas long after their conversation. As the children ran back to him, Enrique patted his shoulder. "Good luck, young man. Show her she deserves respect." Thomas nodded, a newfound determination filling him. Back home after his talk with Enrique, Thomas felt both heavy-hearted and resolute. He spent the night reflecting on the older man's words. For the first time, he realized he not only needed to find Lucy but also had to prove that he had genuinely changed. The next morning, Thomas went to the nearby shopping mall. He stepped into a bookstore he had often walked past without a second glance. One book on the shelf caught his eye, How to Rebuild Trust in a Family. Thomas picked up the book and flipped through a few pages. Its content emphasized the importance of listening and understanding others, things he had never done with Lucy. He decided to buy the book, feeling it was his first step toward redemption. At home, he began reading. Each page served as a mirror, reflecting his mistakes. The criticisms, the belittling comments, and his indifference toward Lucy stood out starkly in every line. Sophia walked into the living room and saw her father engrossed in the book. "Dad, what are you reading?" Thomas looked up and smiled at his daughter. "I'm learning how to be a better father and husband." Sophia tilted her head, curious. "Will Mom come back if you get better?" Her question pierced Thomas's heart. He set the book down and pulled Sophia close. "I hope so, sweetheart. But your mom will only come back if she sees I've truly changed. So I'll do my best. In the following weeks, Thomas began making small but meaningful changes in his life. He spent more time with Sophia and Matthew, listening to their stories instead of simply giving orders. One afternoon, Matthew brought a drawing to show Thomas, hesitantly asking, "Do you like it?" "I drew our family, with Mom too." Thomas looked at the drawing, a lump forming in his throat. "You did a great job, Matthew. I'm so proud of you. And I promise I'll do my best to make sure we can be a happy family with Mom again." Matthew beamed, wrapping his arms around his father. One day, Thomas decided to reach out to Pilar, Lucy's closest friend. He found her number in his contacts and hesitated for a long time before making the call. "Hello, Pilar. It's Thomas," he said, his voice slightly uneasy. Pilar was silent for a few seconds before responding coldly, "What do you want, Thomas?" "If it's about Lucy, I'm not sure I should help you." "I don't blame you for thinking that," Thomas said, trying to keep his voice steady. "But I genuinely want to change. I realize how poorly I treated Lucy. I want her to know I'm trying, and I want to do whatever it takes to make amends." Pilar sighed. "Thomas, if you want Lucy to believe you, you'll need to do more than talk. She's endured so much. She deserves love and respect, which you've never given her." "I know," Thomas said, his voice cracking. "That's why I'm calling you. Do you know of any way I could meet Lucy? I just want to talk to her, just once." Pilar thought for a long time before replying, "I'll talk to Lucy. But I can't promise anything." A week later, Pilar called Thomas back. "Lucy agreed to meet you. But she only wants to talk in a public place. Don't put any pressure on her." Thomas exhaled deeply, relief and nervousness washing over him. "Thank you, Pilar. I promise to behave." On the day of the meeting, Thomas chose a small cafe near Lucy's home. He arrived early and waited anxiously. When Lucy walked in, his heart raced. Lucy looked different. She still had the familiar simplicity, but her eyes now held a confidence he had never noticed before. "Thomas," Lucy said calmly. "What do you want to say?" Thomas stood up, awkwardly inviting her to sit. He took a deep breath, trying to gather his thoughts. "Lucy, I know I hurt you deeply," he began, his voice sincere. "I was careless, arrogant, and didn't value you. I didn't deserve your sacrifices. But I truly want to change." Lucy looked at him, saying nothing. "I met someone in the park, an older man who told me that if I wanted you to trust me again, I needed to act, not just talk. Since then, I've started making changes," Thomas continued. Lucy crossed her arms, her expression still calm. "So you think a few weeks of change are enough to make up for everything you've done?" Thomas shook his head. "No, I know it's not that easy. But I'm willing to spend the rest of my life proving that I can be a better person." Lucy remained silent for a long moment, her gaze thoughtful. Finally, she said, "I need time, Thomas. If you truly want to change, it can't stop at promises." After the cafe meeting, Thomas couldn't stop thinking about Lucy's words, "I need time." Though she hadn't made any promises, Thomas understood it was an opportunity, and he had to seize it wholeheartedly. In the following days, Thomas continued making changes in his life. He enrolled in a communication skills course at a community center near his home. There, he met Alejandro, a passionate and experienced instructor who quickly identified Thomas's issues. "You speak sharply, but sometimes your tone makes others feel disrespected," Alejandro remarked during a discussion. Thomas nodded, taking careful notes. "I think I've been used to giving orders instead of listening." Alejandro smiled. "Acknowledging that is the first step. Now, you need to learn to put yourself in others' shoes. Don't just talk, act to show that you genuinely care." Thomas began applying what he learned, especially with Sophia and Matthew. Every evening, he spent time helping them with their homework, listening to their stories without interrupting or judging. One evening, as the three of them sat on the living room floor working through a tough math problem, Sophia looked at her father with bright eyes. "Dad, you're so different these days. You smile more, and you don't yell at Mom anymore." Thomas smiled, though a pang of sadness tugged at his heart. "I want to be a better father, Sophia. And I want Mom to be proud of me too." Matthew blinked curiously. "Do you think Mom knows that?" Thomas paused before answering gently. "I hope she does." One day, Pilar unexpectedly stopped by the house. Thomas was surprised to see her enter with a less cold demeanor than before. "Pilar, I didn't expect you to come," Thomas said, pulling out a chair for her. "I just wanted to check if you're really changing," Pilar replied, her eyes scrutinizing him. Thomas told Pilar about everything he had been doing, the communication skills course, his efforts with the children, and even how he reread Lucy's letter to remind himself of his shortcomings. Pilar nodded, though her expression remained serious. "I have to admit, what you've done is commendable. But you know, I can't decide for Lucy." "I understand," Thomas said. "I don't expect you to do anything for me. I just want you to know that I'm serious." Pilar stood up, looking Thomas directly in the eye. "I'll talk to Lucy again. But you have to understand, if she agrees to see you again, it will be your last chance." Thomas nodded, hope flooding his chest. 2 weeks later, Pilar called Thomas. "Lucy agreed to meet you, but this time she wants to bring the children. She wants to see if your change is real through how you treat Sophia and Matthew." Thomas felt his heart race. This was an opportunity he couldn't waste. On the day of the meeting, they arranged to meet at a large park with a children's play area. Thomas arrived early, carrying a picnic basket he had prepared himself. He had learned how to make Sophia and Matthew's favorite sandwiches, hoping it would make them happy. When Lucy arrived with Sophia and Matthew, Thomas noticed she seemed more at ease, though she still kept a clear distance. "Hello," Lucy said calmly. Thomas smiled and knelt down to greet Sophia and Matthew first. "Hi, kids. I brought your favorite sandwiches today. I hope they're good." Sophia and Matthew cheered excitedly, each grabbing a sandwich. Lucy stood nearby, watching Thomas carefully. After the snack, Thomas suggested taking the kids to the play area. He didn't hesitate to climb the slides and ride the swings with them, making Sophia and Matthew laugh non-stop. Lucy sat at a distance, watching the scene with a mix of surprise and emotion. When Thomas brought the children back, he sat down across from Lucy. "I know you still have doubts," Thomas said sincerely. "But I hope that today you can see that I'm trying to change not just for me, but for you and the kids." Lucy looked at him for a long moment before saying, "Thomas, what you've done today is a big step. But I need more than that. I don't want the kids to see me endure any more pain." "I understand," Thomas replied. "I don't expect you to forgive me immediately. But I won't give up. You and the kids mean everything to me." Lucy sighed, but for the first time, her eyes lacked the coldness they once held. "We can start again, but slowly. You have to prove that you've truly changed." Thomas nodded, his heart full of hope. As they left the park, Sophia held Lucy's hand and said, "Mom, I think Dad is really different now. I'm so happy." Lucy smiled faintly, glancing back at Thomas, who stood waving. Inside her, a small spark of hope flickered, a sign of a new beginning. The story of Lucy and Thomas highlights an important lesson about the value of respect and gratitude in family relationships. Carelessness and arrogance can destroy the people who love us most, but recognizing mistakes and making efforts to change can provide an opportunity for redemption. Through this journey, we learn that love is not just about words but must be demonstrated through genuine actions. Rebuilding trust requires patience, understanding, and a willingness to take responsibility for the harm caused.
If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing heartwarming stories almost every day. We are very grateful for your support. See you soon.